Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm going to be talking about Air's soundtrack to the film The Virgin Suicides. Even in the early days, Air always had a very cinematic feel to their music. From the mysterious and intriguing tones of Premier Symptomes to the emotional orchestras found in many parts of Moon Safari, Air have always been influenced by soundtrack music. So it should come as no surprise that fairly early on in their career they ended up making a film soundtrack. Now, film soundtracks by artists who aren't usually known for making them are usually kinda weird to talk about, because they don't always match up with the usual style of the artist in question. But The Virgin Suicides is anything but uncharacteristic. In fact, it fits their style so well that it's easy to judge this album right alongside their other work as a regular straight Air album. However, I'm going to have to admit, if one were to judge this album purely as a regular Air album without the context of it being a film soundtrack, then it's actually probably one of their weakest releases. And this is directly because of the typical film soundtrack tropes that this album falls for, namely the fact that a lot of the same melodies are recycled over and over, and some songs sound almost identical. Of course, this can be forgiven by remembering that this is a film soundtrack, so I implore people to judge it as such. As a pure out-of-context Air album, it doesn't measure up to pretty much any of their other releases where they had full creative control of what they were doing. But as a film soundtrack, it's fantastic. Mainly because it is so easy to enjoy out of context. Does that make sense? I'm not saying film soundtracks have, lower standards or anything, but I'll try to explain this on a track-by-track basis. Take the track Bathroom Girl, for instance. By itself, this is a fine track, starting out emotional and somber, then turning into a slow Pink Floyd-esque rock tune after that. But my problem is that there's also a track on this album called Afternoon Sister, which is pretty much the exact same, but without turning into a Pink Floyd-style track in the second half. They're pretty much identical otherwise. Some songs have unique sounds, but not really melodies, and some songs have unique melodies, but not really unique sounds. For instance, the tracks Playground Love and High School Lover. They have exactly the same melody. Do 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 do, do 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 do, you're my playground love. But they do sound noticeably different. High School Lover is played mostly on an acoustic guitar and a vintage piano, with some bass and strings added in later. But Playground Love, meanwhile, has drums, vocals from Gordon Trax, even a saxophone. Playground Love is overall played out like a real song rather than a mood piece from a film. If you couldn't tell, I much prefer Playground Love because of this fact. But like I said, there's also songs that don't really repeat melodies, but repeat atmosphere. And the one song that first comes to mind is The Word Hurricane. It has its own melody that I don't think is repeated elsewhere, but otherwise it has exactly the same Pink Floyd-esque atmosphere found on tracks such as Dirty Trip and the back half of Bathroom Girl. Mainly the former, though. Speaking of which, out of all the songs I just mentioned there, Dirty Trip is probably my favorite. The melody may be reprised in the track Ghost Song, but I far prefer Dirty Trip because it's fleshed out to 6 minutes and once again feels like an actual song, complete with drums and vibraphones. I like the sound of vibraphones. Well, anyway, there are also quite a few tracks that stand out much better and have their own identity. Take Clouds Up, for example. This is probably the most electronic-sounding track, and while it's short, it leaves an impression. Almost entirely due to the synth setting and the way it works well with the rest of the instrumentation, and the fact that it doesn't sound like any of the other tracks. And also the simplistic and easy-to-remember melody as well. Compared to the track Cemetery Party, which also has a distinctive thumping synth sound playing throughout it. But I think it reuses the melody from Bathroom Girl and Afternoon Sister. It's memorable because of that thumping synth, but Clouds Up is better in my eyes. And then there are the other tracks that don't really fit any mold. Dark Messages has these very subtle shifting synth noises and some meandering vibraphone melodies on top. Well, I guess there's not really a straight melody to this track that's like easy to pin down. It's just a quiet and mysterious atmosphere, but for its uniqueness and for vibraphones, I found myself returning to this track a lot more than some of the others. The track Empty House has this kind of off-kilter beat, a menacing bass, and uncomfortable little synth arpeggios with usual strings added in, even a theremin added in later for that extra ghostliness. And then there's Dead Bodies, which starts out with these really intense and fast-paced pianos, and later brings in the strings and some choirs that sound like they came out of Kraftwerk's Radioactivity. Finally though, let's address the elephant in the room that is the finale track, Suicide Underground. This song is notable in that we have a pitched down voice more or less spoiling the entire plot of the movie. I mean, granted, Sofia Coppola had to title the movie The Virgin Suicide, so you know, spoiler, several characters commit suicide. But apparently she was so sure that the emotion of this movie would carry over anyway, so that she spoiled the ending in the title and allowed air to spoil the entire movie in the last song of this album. So I haven't seen the movie yet. All I know is what this track, Suicide Underground, tells me. And this voice almost kind of gave me the wrong idea about this movie, making it sound like it's some kind of screwed up horror movie. And I don't think that's what Sofia Coppola is going for. When I first heard it, it completely freaked me out. Though, looking back on it now, the way the voice describes the actions of the parent characters feels more than a little unrealistic. Who the heck would think it was a good idea to permanently lock your kids in your house? I don't care how big your house is, that's stupid. But no, this is actually probably more of a drama-centric movie that's trying to be sad rather than scary. Then why that pitched-down voice? That gave me nightmares as a kid. But I digress. I admittedly tend to skip this song as it's not a huge standout instrumentally, and the pitch-down voice still kind of takes away from the experience in my eyes. I mean, the movie still got good reviews and people still recommend this soundtrack all the time, so the spoilers can't have that big of an effect on people's enjoyment of the movie, right? But that's about it. Do I overall still recommend this soundtrack? I'd say yes. I still think Air's done better in terms of atmosphere and interesting listening material, but this is probably one of the best, and certainly one of the most unique film soundtracks I've ever had the pleasure of hearing. I probably didn't enjoy it as much as most people did, but I still say it's totally worth checking out anyways. I'm overall feeling a 7.7 out of 10. Favorite tracks? Playground Love, duh. Clouds Up, Dark Messages, Dirty Trip, Empty House, and Dead Bodies. Least favorite track? Afternoon Sister. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.